So therefore, we have to begin to recognize that in the relationship with civil society in the South and in the North, and one of the issues will be discussed at length at the aid effectiveness meeting in Accra next year. One of the challenges that we have to be thinking about how is we think about this relationship between Northern and Southern civil society. Much as most of the folks in the South will tell you, if you want to give us money to build a school, to save a few lives here and there, of course we appreciate it. But you have to recognize those of you who are voters in the countries that have real power, who are part of the so-called OECD, it's come to a point where we need more your voice than your money. Right? And unless you can use your vote and your voice, because you sit on powerful institutions like the World Bank and IMF and so on, and we don't have a voice there of a meaningful level, we need you to be acting in solidarity and pushing your governments to act with the kind of boldness that is needed. And another quick statistic as I begin to round up is on trade justice. Debt cancellation and aid, to a large extent from a development paradigm, increasingly from the South, we see this more as remedial, redress, and so on. It's about the past. It's not about the future. Trade justice is actually something that has greater potential to take larger numbers of people out of poverty and a more forward-looking thing. But just look at this. The European Union, you go look at these development documents, you will cry with emotion how committed they are about poverty, about governance, and so on. But how can the European Union look us in the eye and tell us they are really concerned when every single day, every European cow is subsidized to the tune of €2 per day? And given current exchange rates, that's the equivalent of $3 a day. Half the people on this planet live on less than the subsidy given to every single cow by the European Union. Of course, it's not given to the poor cows, it's given to the farmers. The cows get killed eventually. But the implication of that, apart from the immorality of that statistic, is twofold. One, African farmers, for example, even though they're like less than 200 kilometers from the tip of Europe, can't export into those markets because not only the governments can't really give them subsidies, but the World Bank and IMF, which are controlled by the rich countries of the world, I've told through structural adjustment programs, even if the governments wanted to give subsidies, that they can't give it a long time ago, right? So not only they can't export into Europe, but then those farmers make their profit because they got so much of subsidies. They can then afford to dump surplus products like chickens in Ghana, and the poultry farmers in Ghana cannot even compete in their own markets. And this is called free trade. So and therefore I'm saying this is not about charity, this is about justice. And at the end of the day, as Bishop Tutu often quotes, there's an African proverb which he quotes often, which says, I am because you are. A human being is only a human being through his or her relationships with other human beings. And today, our humanity has to transcend artificial boundaries that make no sense. And unless our humanity embraces the fact that it's an injustice, that countries will preach one thing and do another thing in reality, when in fact the implications of that are devastating not only to the citizens in the developing world, but actually to their own citizens. If you look at the farmers who are benefiting from the subsidies in Europe and North America, for example, they are not your small farms, your family farms, and so on. These are big commercial agriculture. So I'm sure I'm out of time. So let me round up by saying the one challenge that civil society must address, if it's to be taken seriously, is our own legitimacy, transparency, and accountability. We cannot be saying to governments and business, you must maintain certain ethical standards and so on, but we don't walk the talk ourselves. We have to ensure that with increasing command of public resources, with increasing influence and so on, must also come the burden of greater public accountability. And I don't want to take too much of time, but just to simply say that at Civicus we have been working to develop codes of ethical conduct and so on, and many of the big international NGOs, some of which are represented in this room, have now signed up to what we call the International NGO Accountability Charter. And yeah, again, sadly, And the tribute you should be paid to President George W. Bush, because his think tank, the American Enterprise Institute, together with the Australian Public Affairs Institute, organized a conference called Holding the Unelected Few Accountable. And what came out of that was a thing called NGOWatch.org. And as a result, eventually civil society organizations said, we've got to take this thing seriously. And so I was in London recently, and one NGO that's not listed on NGOWatch.org, the CEO was telling me, you know what, how can we get listed on that thing? Please, when do you know? I said, no, we're not running that thing because it's become a badge of honor to be listed on it. So I would like to close with giving thanks to, when I started this job, I met a few people in this room, and I want to thank them. Well, Don was one, Jane Foster, who was at Commonwealth Secretariat and worked with us at Civicus. And I want to particularly, though, single out Karen, who I now discovered she's a judge, and somebody who's not here, Marcus Akwata Brown, who I'm pleased to say, at the age of 25, Jane? At 25, was the Civicus board member. It was somebody with the assistance of Jane and others. We brought him on board. They taught me a Maori saying, and I don't want to butcher the Maori language, so I'm just going to say it in English, but it's something that has informed a lot of my thinking, and it's a very simple way to capture, for me, what civil society is about. And the Maori asked, what is the most important thing in the world? And they answered, it is people, it is people, it is people. And I will leave you with the personal story of my friend Lenny Naidoo, who, same surname, no relation. At the age of 22, we were fleeing the country, and he asked me a question, Kumi, what is the biggest contribution any one of us can make to the cause of humanity? And I said, such an easy question, giving your life. He said, you mean going out, getting shot, and becoming a martyr? I said, yeah. He said, that's the wrong answer. He said, it's not giving your life, but it's giving the rest of your life. I was 22 years old at that time, and I must make a confession. He was a vegetarian, and I didn't quite get vegetarianism then. I do get it now. I thought, he's always saying things like that. I didn't really quite get it. Unfortunately, 2 years later, my friend Lenny and 3 young women from Durban were brutally murdered by the apartheid regime. There were so many bullets in their bodies, the parents couldn't identify them in the mortuary. And I had to think, what was my friend Lenny trying to tell me at the age of 22 in our last conversation before we fled into exile in different ways? What he was saying was simply this: the struggle for justice, the struggle to end global poverty, the struggle for human rights, these struggles are marathons, they're not sprints. And all of us who are in this room here today need to recognize that it's a privilege to be able to be part of these various struggles that we've embraced. There are many people who are too poor, too terrified, too repressed to be able to actually be able to do what you and I are able to do. And so therefore the real sacrifice that we can make is to recognize that we will not get a quick return on our investment of activism, that we're not going to have a magic bullet, that in fact the struggle for the things most progressive civil society is concerned are struggles that will take decades rather than 6 months or 3-year project cycles. Kia ora. Thank you very, very much.